Hello everyone, and we're back here with another interview at SNN Sports. I'm Jack Crammer. I'm delighted to be joined today by St Mirren legend, former player, captain and manager, Tony Fitzpatrick. Hi Tony.
Real pleasure to be here, Jack. Thank you.
So we're just going to go over your career, from start to finish.
Yeah, long time.
So we'll just start by starting out. You were born 1956. You're from Postle, if I'm not mistaken. So quite a rough sort of area. What was it like sort of growing up in the 60s in Postle?
Yeah, just as you say, Jack, what it was, of course, I mean, I don't think it's changed since the days I've sort of been. I still go back to Postle now, but you're right, I was brought up in the sort of late 50s, 60s, 70s in Postle. It was like any scheme, great people.
Yep.
But there was a lot of poverty, a lot of violence, and that sort of came into my household as well. I had older brothers who were a bit sort of naughty. But going that way was sort of tough. It was a tough upbringing, there's no doubt about that. But the good thing for me was, at that time, football was, I always had a dream of being a footballer. So that kept me away from the sort of trouble side within the postal fleet or the gangs or whatever was there. So football was my main objective at that time, even for an early age. So that sort of kept me away from that. So, but anywhere in life, it was, I wouldn't have changed my upbringing. I think it gives you a bit of character as well. You had to survive in these areas and
Life skills.
Life skills, exactly that. Yeah.
So we're here to talk about your football career, but there is one thing I would like to ask you about. Obviously, you mentioned your older brother obviously fell into a bit of the lifestyle of the area. And you obviously ended up having an attack on your finger that had to get reattached. So, what was that experience like for you, and how did you sort of get through it?
Yeah, it was tough because, as you say, and I'll give my brothers, his name was Psycho, so that gives you an idea of what he was like. But there was always people out to get him.
Yeah.
And where Postle is, there's the Moss House it's called, and there's sort of the shows would come there every year, and they would do the waltzers and the cars, all different things. And I happened to be there with a couple of my pals, and one of my pals actually said to me, "You better run." And I'm going, "What? Why?" And they're saying, and I looked across and there was a crowd of boys, and they couldn't get my brother, so they came for me. And I thought I was getting away, but one of them had a sort of machete and sort of flung, but you can see it there, all the stuff. So, but I managed to, once I get that with my finger off, by the way, I've never done it in my life before, but I jumped this fence thing and got away. And that's, I got all that sort of stitched back on, and you can see it all there. But it was traumatic at the time, of course it was. But as I say, and that's the thing about crime and about these violence and stuff like that, it goes into families, and it's sad. But I survived it, and that was the main thing.
So did that give you that sort of extra motivation to sort of make something yourself and carve a career in football?
No, definitely. As I say, again, my mum and dad were fantastic people, don't get me wrong. My dad was well known in Postle as well, Fitzy, and my older brother's Psycho and a couple of other ones. And it does that, as I say, I didn't want to go down that life, if I'm being honest. I'd sort of wanted to be a footballer, and always as a kid, I was taken away quite a lot from my household for the age of 8 to 12. I was put in homes and stuff like that. So a lot of times I was away for 3 months at a time. And as I say, that when I went back into the household, the violence and stuff, it was difficult. But I always had that dream of being a footballer. And I used to hide away and close my eyes and dream about being a footballer. And it's all right doing that, but I had to do the practice to become that.
So obviously you mentioned your father, and you joined sort of his sort of youth team starting out, and then from there you went on to, was it the YM? And they were also a sort of feeder club of sorts to Aston Villa. And you managed to go down there for a few trials, and I've heard you speak about playing before a derby match against Birmingham. What was that sort of experience like as a young boy going down there?
Yeah, it was incredible, as I say, coming through Postle, and Postle YM saved so many kids in the days. The guy Bobby Dinney, who sadly passed away last year, but Bobby was, and he was an OBE, and he was a fantastic man for Porso. You're right, after my dad, and that helped my dad as well, he started a team called Dundasville. I played there for a year and it disbanded, went to Porso YM. That's everybody's dream, to play for Porso YM. It came through that area. And but there, you're right, there they were the nursery to Arsenal, and then it changed to Aston Villa. And I was really struggling at the time because I was pretty small. I was saying small, thin, never had sort of any strength and stuff. So I was struggling with Porso YM at the time. But what happened was we went down to Aston Villa to play, and all these boys were getting offered down every week. Most of my teammates, guys, even like Bobby Russell, who went on to play for Rangers and stuff like that. There's really good players in there, and I struggled. But that changed my life, going down to Aston Villa, believe it or not, was Porso YM. Before the Birmingham game, there was 40,000 people in, and we played for 40 minutes before that. Remember, I'm saying to you, as a kid, I had this, it's not a gift, but I had this thing where I could close my eyes, and I dreamt it every day, running out a tunnel into a football park, and the crowd singing my name and stuff like that. And that changed my life really, because that day when I stood in that tunnel with Porso YM players, all these English lads who were all 6'3" at the time and all massive guys, I stood in that tunnel and I looked about me, and even they were all shaking, and even my teammates, a lot of them, because of the noise. But I'd lived that dream every day. I'd sort of went through that, and then when I ran onto the park, they weren't singing my name, but I believed they were. And I actually had a good game that day, and Aston Villa became very interested in us and started to sort of want to sign us and bring us down for a month and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So you talk about that sort of just going over your head. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of players do that sort of visualisation, manifesting it. So you're ahead of your time, really.
Well,
there.
I didn't realise I'd done that to escape the violence, as I say. You're right. Now, it's funny, I didn't even know what that was at that time. Just as a kid, I carried the ball everywhere. But even in the classroom, because I openly say as well, I was dyslexic, so I found it very difficult in school. I'd sit away at the back of the class, and that's what I would do. I'd daydream. Call it daydreaming, but now they call it visualisation and all these things manifesting and stuff. But it just shows you, as a kid, that's what I did, to be honest. But I'd done it no through any knowledge of anything, and it works. But now I try to do it throughout my life now with other things, no? So, yeah.
So, obviously, you mentioned dyslexic. I mean, back in those days, there wasn't too much known about it. How did you manage to overcome that later in life?
And you know, that was a big guilt for me, because in school, I didn't realise, we sit in the back of the class, even, you know, in the days they had the big sort of, it was called the blackboard in the days, and the teacher would write up, and I just couldn't understand what was there, and I didn't realise that, and even reading. And it was tough in the days, because they would give you a book home, and my mum and dad would try and teach you to read, and this is where I became really frightened, because my dad had no patience. He was a tough man.
Old school.
And when I was reading, then they would say, right, now I'm going, whoa, and then he would, because I couldn't do it, he would hit you or some of that. Then my mum would get involved. She would say, wait, Fitz, what are you doing? Don't do that. And then they two would argue, and there would be violence there, and you'd see. So every day I was hiding and stuff like that, because I didn't want to bring my book home, because I knew it was going to end up with my mum and dad fighting and stuff like that. So all these sort of things as a kid, it was quite traumatic at that time. It's sounding thing, but again, that dreamlike state and wanting something, I think if you've got a purpose in life, whatever it is, that dream, and people know up your dream, even at that early age. My school teacher at the time used to laugh when he caught me sleeping at the back of the class daydreaming. He would really get in about me and say, so what you tell the class, and I would say, I like to be a footballer. And I remember he was a big 6'4" guy, and he used to bend over laughing and point at me in front of everyone and say, you're a footballer, look at the state of you, son. I've watched you in the training, I've watched you in the playground, you're hopeless. And everybody was bringing you down, even your family members as well, people in the scheme as well. But again, you hopefully try and believe in yourself a wee bit. And maybe it was through a dream, through dreaming and through believing in yourself. So it's difficult, but you have to overcome these things in life.
Well, you certainly proved all your doubters wrong in the end.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
So we'll go on to your career now.
Yes.
Obviously, joining St Mirren.
Yeah.
So obviously nowadays you've got all these sort of pro youth pathways,
Yeah.
under 21s. What was it like coming through a team back in the 70s?
It was really tough. As I say, I was with Post YM at the time, and Aston Villa wanted, but at the time that I became 15, but I'd been training with St Mirren since 12 years of age, training a Tuesday and a Thursday nights, but still going down to Aston Villa as well. And what made me join St Mirren actually was the Aston Villa thing. I went down for a month for a trial, and they said they would make a decision on me. And after a month, I thought I'd done pretty well, but they got me in a room similar to this, and all the coaches were there, and the manager was there, and they were very blunt, and they told me he was going to be very blunt. And he said, listen, Tony, we've watched you, of course. We've had you down for a month now. I'm going to be honest with you, go back up the road. I don't think you'll ever become a professional footballer. Get a trade. You're too small. You're not strong enough. He told me all my bad things about my life, and so he says, we're not going to sign you. So I went back up the road, and you can imagine going back up into a scheme. And I noticed it in my household as well. You were a failure, really. So, but my cling was, I always had St Mirren in the background. And I generally, I'm not just saying this, even if Aston Villa would have offered me, I'd generally 70% I'd have signed for St Mirren. I remember standing in the old Love Street. It was a summer's night as a young kid, standing at the top of the Love Street and looking down and going, this is where I want to play. That I know I want to play here. This is where I want to play. And my dad didn't want me to sign for St Mirren, but I sort of forced the hand to do that. So that's how I ended up signing. I was and I became the assistant groundsman at the time with a guy called Jimmy Ritchie and the Ritchie family, who I'm still close to this day, looked after me. And very quickly after that, as I say, a year later I was married at 16. I got married at 16, so, and then Sir Alex came in, which changed my life.
So you mentioned also Sir Alex arrived. He made you captain at just 19.
He did. I was 18 actually. I know 18? People put 19, but I was only 18 at the time. Yeah.
So 18 years old, captain of St Mirren.
Yeah.
Sir Alex obviously came in not too long after he started his managerial career.
Yeah.
So what sort of impact was he like? And everybody knows what he's like at Man United, Aberdeen. What was he like in his younger days, sort of making his way?
Well, you can imagine he was a young manager. He'd only been at East Stirling a few months and then came to St Mirren, and he was, as soon as he came in, I was unfortunate because I was working for the chairman at the time, Willie Todd, as a painter, no decorator, a painting all the railings and painting sort of windows and stuff like that. And I had took pleurisy, so when Alec came in, he never seen me at first. I'd been ill, but that man coming, you just knew. I mean, somebody asked me before, would you think even meeting him at that time and with St Mirren he'd have went on to be what he was? Yeah. He had such a passion, not just for the team. What Sir Alex done, he's Sir Alex now, but what the boss done at that time was incredible, because he built the whole of Paisley, joined St Mirren. I mean, we became, he built a dynasty around St Mirren, and with the whole of Paisley and Renfrewshire. No, it was phenomenal what he done. And then he started to build a team, of course, because there was a lot of young players there at the time. And he brought in Jackie Copeland, Dean Monroe, Jimmy Bones, just that bit of experience there as well, no? So it was phenomenal.
So obviously you won the first division title with Sir Alex there. And I read somewhere the average age of that team was only 19 or 20 years old.
Yeah.
And that just kind of shows. I mean, you heard everyone talk later during the time Man United, you don't win anything with kids, but they clearly didn't know he'd already had that blueprint at St Mirren.
And I think that's the great thing about the man, wherever he's went, Aberdeen, Man United, but especially at St Mirren, and it's give youth a chance. How do you know they're going to do it? And he done it. He believed in youth players, and he done the same at Man United and Aberdeen. But for us, we had 6 or 7 young players in the team playing every single week. And I'm a great believer in that. No, people look now, we've got some great young players at St Mirren now. Just give them the chance to get in and play, because they'll never ever let you down. And that was his philosophy. They knew, okay, you'll make mistakes, but young players give everything. No, their honesty about them, they'll run, they'll chase and stuff like that. and that was his sort of motivator. Like, plus he was a really top tactical. He was a really top manager, brilliant. But not just the football team, as I say. Anybody that lived in this area at that time, we lived off of that man for 20 years after it. What he'd put in place,
the building block.
Yeah, he did.
So later on, he obviously had a huge team of coaches, and he was more of a manager than a coach.
Yeah.
In his younger days, what was he like? Was he involved in the training pitch a lot?
Every day, but Alec, the boss knew as well that his strength was management, man management. He was good in the coaching field, but he brought top coaches in for him. When Ricky McFarlane, who ended up becoming St Mirren's manager down the line, Ricky was a physio, but he was also a first team coach, and Ricky McFarlane was a brilliant coach. So he brought him in, Big Davy Provan for Rangers. So he always had top coaches, and he done the exact same at Aberdeen, Walter Smiths, with Man United. So he knows his strengths as well, and that's a great thing to have in life. When you're as good as he is, he brings in people, good people, probably better than him in the training fields. And that's where you have to separate your ego and say, right, but he was a top manager in terms of he knew you, he knew your family, he knew your family's family, he knew everybody's name. He cared for people. Yeah. And I know it's a simple thing to say, he loved and cared for people, and you felt that even as a youngster. Many people, famous people like Ronaldo, Beckham will say he's like a dad to them, and that's what he's like.
Well, you see guys like Ronaldo, they still run at him. Gary Neville, maybe not Roy Keane. These sort of guys still call him boss. And you referred to him as boss earlier. It just shows the respect he commands off his players. And
he's deserved that. Respect's a hard thing to get in life, but he's done that all the way through. And he's, I dread to think back to the days when he lost his job here, when he was sacked here. It was the biggest mistake in St Mirren's history ever.
We'll come on to that in a second.
Right, okay, sorry.
So I just want to touch on one sort of wee story I picked up. You mentioned your pleurisy. There was a story somewhere that you actually got your father to pretend to be a club doctor to clear yourself to play.
It's true. It was, I had pleurisy and the doctor wouldn't give me a sign off. The Dr. McClure was my doctor at the time, and he wouldn't sign me off because he's saying, you can't play, you can't train, you've got to do this and that. So Alec had pulled me in, and he'd said, the boss had pulled me in and said, look, we've got a reserve coming up game against Celtic. Are you going to be fit for this? And I says, aye. I says, and I don't know what's postal boy in me. I went, I says, I'm going to the doctor's today, so my final checkup, and I'm fine. He went, right, you'll play on Tuesday night, he says, and we'll take it for there. He says, listen, he says, what's your doctor? I'll phone your doctor. I went, oh, I've not got it. I says, but I says, I'll get him to phone you. He says, right, okay. So I went home and I told my dad. My dad's a wise man. And he went, oh, what can we do? So him and my mum, he says, right, Mary, listen. And there was no phones in the days, right? The woman next door, Jenny Little, had a phone. And so we went in next door. And it was all red phones in the days. And you had the thing at the top, you could beep, no thing. So anyway, my mum was terrified, but she phoned and what was her name at the time? Gina, someone answered it, and my mum says, yeah, I've got Dr. McClure on the phone here for Mr. Ferguson and stuff. So she's pressing the thing, and so my dad went on going, yeah, hello, Mr. Ferguson. Oh, call me Alec, and I'm listening to this conversation, and he's going, no, we've signed Tony off, he's fine, he's fine, and he's saying all the best for the future. My dad put on his voice and all that, and Alec sort of felt it. That's great. He says, doctor, that's great to hear. Bump, bump, bump. So he put the phone down, and I did play on the Tuesday night, and right after it, he sort of, a couple of weeks later, he got everybody in, and he made me captain, so which was phenomenal. It changed my life because I just, as I said, I'd been married over a year or so, and I mean, but I was 16 when I got married, so I was 17, coming up for 18, and he was captain.
Did he ever catch on?
He did, because he's read my book and stuff like that, and I get calls and he'll go, Fitzpatrick. But he's, no, he never caught on, no, and I kept that back from him for a long, long time. It was amazing, honestly, but that was my mum and dad, true story.
So you mentioned obviously St Mirren, the only team ever to sack Alex Ferguson. What what was the team's take on it? Because obviously you clearly all loved them. So what was the squad's thoughts on it?
It came a shock, actually. As I said, it was fantastic to everyone, because by this time, remember, St Mirren, what he said at the beginning to me is, when he was maintenance captain, we'll be, in 5 years' time, we'll be above Celtic and Rangers, we'll be in Europe, we'll be winning cups and all these things. We're on that platform. He was there for 3 years. We were in the Premier League. We were starting to do really well. So it was a shock to us all, because I remember as well, and I had a phone in the house this time. I got a phone call about 6:30 at night, 6:45 at night, and I picked the phone, and it was Ricky McFarlane. Ricky says, Tony says, come down to the I says, why, Ricky? He went, just get down to the club. So I put the phone down, and my missus at the time says, what's wrong? And in the days I thought, I'm getting a transfer. Because they're phoning me at this time, they want me doing it the ground. That's the way it worked. Aye. They go to you down and say, listen, they're interested, they sold you or whatever. They had that power. But I went down, and the boss was in his room, and he was pretty upset, actually, and he just went, I've been sacked, and I couldn't believe it. And he says, I'll talk to the boys tomorrow. I says, right, okay. So I left there, and the directors were there, and I had words with them. They'd said to me, could they speak? And I said, no, I'm not interested in speaking to you. And I did say then, this is the truth, I did say, you have made the biggest mistake in your life, letting him go. And actually, it wasn't St Mirren, it was the directors I was against, really. But I then sort of went as a witness for Sir Alex and his, for the boss and his
employment tribunal.
Yeah, I went for a witness, so that didn't go too well as well.
What was the sort of reason they were given at the time?
Afterwards, so do you know the main reason was they wanted him out for some. There was all these stories going about, which you always hear about this and that, and everybody knew there were a lot of nonsense. People throw things out to try and defect, and there was nothing like that. What they got him on, and I was a witness to this that day as well. Was Alec Law was the groundsman at the time, and he had a couple of kids, and his old van had broke down, and the boss gave him a line of his car to go to Saltcoats for that day. So the tribunal got him in a technicality where they said he never asked permission to hand out his club car to another employee. That's what he lost in, which was criminal. It was. But there was nothing else within that. They were just, he was, do you know, sometimes I think he was probably too ambitious for the board at the time. And because he put us all full time, he gave us all great contracts, and then he was wanting to bring other people in with that. And sometimes in life, it's too much for certain people, and they found reasons. But that's the reason he lost it, and that's where I sort of wanted to leave St Mirren after that as well.
So we'll touch on when you eventually leave St Mirren. I just want to ask first of all, you've seen the success he went on to have at Aberdeen, European Cup winners, Cup winning league titles. Do you believe that would have happened at St Mirren if he'd stayed?
100%, no doubts. Don't know if I'd have been part of that, because he might have brought other players in, and you never know. But no, there was no. For day one, what he done at St Mirren Football Club, and he was building this team to be something special. And that he would have, what he done at Aberdeen, that'd have happened at St Mirren, no doubt. Wherever he went, it was going to happen. And he's got that sort of drive in him.
So he did leave St Mirren in 1979 to head down south to Bristol City, an English game. I mean, did you have any sort of other offers, you know, from the likes of Celtic or Rangers or anything like that?
It's a good question, because I did. Celtic and Aberdeen were generally, Talent wanted to take me, the boss wanted to take me Aberdeen after the tribute, and when they went up there. But some of them, they had the power in the days.
No Bosman rule.
No, and they were saying, you're not signing for another Scottish club. I'd been approached by Celtic as well. So, and there was 3 English clubs, believe it or not, Bristol City, Leeds United, and believe it or not, Aston Villa. But it was a different manager. There was a guy called Ron Saunders who'd come in. But I went and spoke to all the clubs, and I picked Bristol, to be honest, which was a fantastic place for the family to stay for a start. They were in the Premier League. Leeds and Aston Villa were, but Leeds and Aston Villa were really struggling at that time, where Bristol were in the up, and there was about 4 or 5 Scottish boys there, which was great as well. So I thought I picked Bristol. And I think I should have maybe picked Villa at the time, and this is where they talk about letting things go in life, and I'll be totally honest, I couldn't let it go what Aston Villa had said about me as a kid. No, they'd really destroyed me. And see, to be fair, the manager at that time, who was a genius, they went on to win the European Cup 2 years later. But when in my talk with him, he said to me, because I was playing for the Scotland under 21s at the time, and he went, listen, and it just hit a nerve with me when he says, listen, Tony, he says, you did well against England under 21, we did this and that. We feel we'll get you in. We don't know if you'll be ready for the first team. And I was just, what?
Been captain of St Mirren.
Yeah, and then this and that, and I was, it wasn't nice. So I just got up and I thought that was me finished with that. Leeds United was good, but they were struggling at that time, believe it or not. But Bristol seemed the best place. And I've never regretted going to Bristol either, no, because it was two and a bit great years. Alan Dix was my bit, then Roy Hodgson came in, and that was a brilliant time with Roy.
So what was, everyone obviously knows Roy as sort of elder statesman of English football. What was he like? He was
a young coach at that time. Him and Bob Houghton had took Malmo to the European Cup final against Nottingham Forest, where they got beat 1-0. Then he joined us at Bristol. And again, he was like Sir Alex in many ways, although his main strength was on the training field. Roy was one of the best coaches I've ever came across. He was fantastic. But like anything in football, Bristol was paying too much money to players, myself included probably, which they couldn't cope with. And they were starting to sell off players, and the club was going downhill. They sold Jerry Gowty, Man City, Joe Royal to Norwich. They were selling Gary Collar to American team for 400. Big money in the days. Were selling. And so again, I had the opportunity. Roy, I got on brilliant with Roy Hodgson. He actually changed my life again a bit down there, because I started getting in Scotland squads again and all that, and that was sort of through Roy, his coaching, and the way the team was starting to build up again. So yeah.
So down to Roy Hodgson, you mentioned there, do you think if you could merge him on the training field and Sir Alex's man management, you'd have sort of super manager?
You would have, yeah. But the two of them, I mean, Roy was a decent manager as well, to be fair. I mean, he had a good way about him. Alec was good in the boss was good in the training field, but no, as you say, no, there's difference. Yeah. But there's nobody perfect. Nobody perfect.
So what was the difference in the English game? You mentioned also when you were younger, the boys were bigger. Was it more physical in Scotland?
That's a great point, because I played in the Premier League up here, and I must admit to you, my first game down in Bristol City was against Leeds United, who were, so we drew 2 each. But I'll be totally honest with you, England was 5 times harder. See, after a game at Bristol, you needed days and days to recover. The pace of the game was over a period of time. So nowadays, I think the English game, and I think it's still the same these days. I know the Premier League's really good, and the Premier League in my time was excellent. And in a one-off game, teams would beat English teams, don't get me wrong, but over a period of time. But I found that in England, where if you played a pass and made a run, sometimes the player wouldn't match you. But in England, they were with you all the time, and physically, boys, they were all strength. You
still see that nowadays. Like if an English team comes up for a friendly, they're all absolutely massive.
Oh, they're incredible. But I think Scottish, hopefully, when I look at the St Mirren team now, you just need to look at our boys now, and you're talking about, they're all top athletes, aren't they? They're all big, powerful boys. They can run, they can play as well, of course. But I'm going way back to the 70, 79, 78. No, so you're way back then. These guys were monsters, weren't they?
So that was a difficult time in English football, coming into the early 80s. Did you ever have any sort of issues with the hooliganism back then?
Do you know what? It was, I can't remember. They used to run on the park. The usual stuff they done. They did. There was usually fights. So you had that everywhere in football, didn't you? Get it in every sport, boxing, darts. You get it everywhere. But that's something which is so difficult for a club to sort of control, I feel, But yeah, there was always the casuals or whatever they were called,
So I read on Celtic's website when you were talking about your book, you came close to signing for Celtic, your father's team. Was that after you left Bristol, or was that before?
No, 3 times I had chances to sign. after the Aston Villa thing, Celtic wanted to sign me.
Yep.
But I went to, it was Christmas Eve, and my dad wanted me to sign for Celtic. And the whole family, and they all wanted me to sign for Celtic. But remember I said to you, I'd made up my mind.
Focus on St Mirren.
I'm St Mirren. And I always remember my dad, it was Tommy Bryceland was the manager, wasn't it? Sir Alex sent me, it was Tommy Bryceland. And I'd said to him, I want to sign for St Mirren. I said, but my dad, and I told him the truth. And he says, right, get your dad in. And him and Will Craig was the chairman at that time. So I comes down, and my dad's all the way from Glasgow. We get the bus and then get the train through. And all the way in, honestly. My dad smoked all the time, so, and he's going, you're not signing you're signing for Celtic. And I'm saying, Dad, I'm telling you, they offer you, so you don't sign. We go away, and we talk about it and all that. And so we got down, so we got into the boardroom, and my dad's sitting there, and Tommy, of course, has got the contract. And my dad's sort of not having it, no. So he goes, so he done his spiel, Tommy, saying your son this and that and all the thing. And my dad's, well, and my dad made the biggest mistake because he went like, and Tom said, well, what do you think? He went, well, I'm leaving this to Tony. And he looked at me, and I says, well, I want to sign Dad for St Mirren. So he was, oh no, we need to talk. And I went, no, I want to. He says, the boy wants to come here.
The bus journey home must have been.
Well, honestly. So I signed, but my dad never spoke, and this is the truth, he never spoke for me for Love Street. We walked up Love Street towards the train station, and he was smoking, he kept spitting all the way up, and I know, I says, I'm in for a doing when I get in the house. But a bit of thing I said to him, just as we got in the train, I said to him, I went, Dad, I said, listen, listen to me, I've signed for some, I'm going to get in their first team, and then Celtic will sign me. Aye. And it was like a light bulb when he went, oh. And you could smoke in the trains nowadays and stuff like that. He goes, aye. He went, right. I says, so I want to get in this team and I'll sign for Celtic. And he goes, right, so, and it must have worked because when my mum was there, she knew because I told my mum I wanted to sign. She was working on him, but he wouldn't have it. And he went, by the way, he's signed for St Mirren. He said, but he's going to sign for Celtic. And a couple of them was, oh, that's great, son, and this and that. So that's how that happened.
So you mentioned 3 times. When was the other?
That was the time there, and then the other time was when the boss, Fergie was the boss. I was playing for St Mirren at the time, of course, against Celtic. We just got in, and Alec called me into the coach's room, and he says to me, "Listen, you're going to see the papers tomorrow. There's a lot of things getting said and that." He says, "Celtic are made a bit. They're going to want to sign you and stuff like that, but you're not going." He says, I'm building a team here. He says, so, and I'm getting you a new coach, you know, we've looked after you, stuff like that. He said, we're building a team here, so forget it, go on with the game tomorrow. I was like, okay. So that happened as well. And then the last time was coming up for Bristol. Yeah. I actually spoke to Big Billy and John. Frank McGarvey phoned me first because he'd went for Liverpool. Me and Frank were very close. Yep. Even when he was at Liverpool, we got him down and meet each other. So Frank was the first contact when I was at Bristol, phoned me and says, listen, I was going to play West Ham on a Tuesday night. Frank phoned me and says, listen, Celtic want to sign you. He says, Big Billy will give you a phone, or John Clark will give you a phone and stuff like that, which they did. Yep. And they said they were going to sign me. And I says, right. And I was going to go to Celtic. And I phoned my dad to say, I'm signing for Celtic on Friday. And he says, oh, brilliant. So I put the phone down. The phone about an hour later went, and it was Sir Alex for Aberdeen. And he went, listen, we're you know I want you up here, so you're going to sign for Aberdeen and stuff like that. And it was so confusing, honestly, this is the truth, it was so confusing. But St Mirren also had been in, because Ricky McFarlane, the chairman at the time, was a guy called Louis Keane, who I knew if I was a kid on the way through. And it was back and forward with these 3 teams. And it just got to the stage was, I'd picked Aberdeen at first. I went, I'm going to go with Sir Alex. So Celtic dropped, you went and talked to it. So that dropped away, and it was between St Mirren and Aberdeen. And Alec was sort of pondering a bit because he wanted Peter Weir up and he was giving Scanlon, but he still wanted me. He was saying, listen, I want to get Peter Weir and stuff like that. And I said, no, I totally understand it. And then I met Ricky and them, and I went, do you know what? St Mirren's just, I'm going to sign for St Mirren. And I ended up signing for St Mirren.
So obviously coming back to St Mirren, a few years later, probably the biggest moment in the club's sort of history, the 1987 Scottish Cup final. Photo up in the room here. You had players there like, young Paul Lambert, Ian Ferguson. Was it Frank McAvenny there, or
no? It was Frank McGarvey was there at the time.
I mean, a cracking team full of players that would either had been or would go on to do great things.
Oh no, definitely.
What was that experience like against Dundee United that day? Leading the team out.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I got a bad injury that season, broke my jaw, plus I'd done my knee in, so I missed a lot of all the games up to the cup final. But it was an incredible, because Dundee United were one of the top teams, and they'd been in a European Cup final a few days before and just had get beat. So, and we'd always done well against Dundee United, with players that could upset their back line with the Hegartys and Nerys and stuff like that. But what happened is, I always remember this as well in the dressing room, when the teams came through, Jim McLean, who was a brilliant manager, but he left Hegarty out and he'd left the boy Gallagher out, who was a top player as well, Kevin Gallagher. And that gave us a real boost as well, because the boy Gallagher and Hegarty at the back. But it was fantastic. I think the best thing is when you come out onto the Hampden, it was a dream. And I've seen it since at the Scottish League Cup, but no, it's like a Scottish Cup, because the whole at the end, there was the St Mirren end, and there was over 30,000 there, no problem with St Mirren support, and it was just black and white. And that'll live with me forever, because at the end of the game as well, when we went to get the cup, me and Billy Abercrombie, who was captain, I was club captain, but we held the cup together. Me and Billy went to school together as kids. We were brought up together, and to run towards that massive wall of black and white holding the Scottish Cup was everybody's dream, and it was great doing it with Billy as well.
If that teacher could have seen the two of you now.
Billy was very clever, but he was that's one thing where I was the opposite. And I mean, Billy Abercrombie was honestly, could have been anything in life. He was a genius in terms of schoolwork and all the stuff. So
does that help on a football pitch, just having that bit in your brain to know where to go?
They say education, the more educated you are, you should be, stuff like that. But I think most players aren't got that. But yeah, I think it helps if you've got a bit of education. But I never had that in my life. I never had the education.
Right, we'll just touch back on the Scottish Cup final. I mean, the Old Hampden, the terrace, and the fans. I mean, what was the day like after lifting the cup? What was the night like after that?
And we always tell you to try and enjoy this, and it was a blur. But I always remember we into extra time, 5 minutes to go, and the referee was Dougie Hope, who was the referee, and I always remember chasing him for the last 5 minutes, actually begging him to blow the whistle.
How long,
I know, and this, and saying all that to him, and saying, he was saying, Fitzpatrick, get away from me. But when that happened and we ran to that, I always remember that, coming back in the bus then, going through Barhead and all the areas we went through to get to the town hall. The streets were lined. I've never seen them like this in my life, all the way. And then when we hit the town hall, it was just, I think there's photos everywhere of this. They were up lamp posts, there was the place was stowed, and we were in the balcony of the town hall, and it was a magnificent night. And I would say that I never drank as a football player. I never drank in my life. And one of the things I'd said to the boys, if we win the Scottish Cup, I'll take a drink at the Scottish Cup. And so it was full of champagne. And so when we won it, that was my first ever taste of alcohol when I drank out of that. And that was my downfall after that. I got to taste the champagne.
If only you'd committed to just doing it after cup wins.
I know, that's true, I'd have been all right. But no, that was, honestly, I stayed off the drink till I was 40, but it was, that was the only time. But what a day it was, but not just for the team, I think for the whole of Paisley. And this is what it means, this is where Fergie, even way back in the days, that's in my DNA now, Paisley and Renfrewshire. And even, when you see now, there's a local team, Johnson Borough, who's just won the Scottish Cup there. What that means to the whole of Paisley and Renfrew, but to that area, you know, when you see them in schools, you see them everywhere. I've had the pleasure to hold that cup the other day there.
Yeah, I've done it myself.
No, aye, and it's it means so much to people, you know, because that's the power of football. That is the power of football. That's the heart of when a community is the heart of that area. You know, whether it be Johnson, Borough and Johnston, us here in Paisley and Renfrewshire, it's phenomenal. And that day will live with us. And I think if you talk to any player that played that day or was part of the squad or was that's the day you remember out your career as that special time.
So you touched on earlier about how going down to Aston Villa, you'd visualise, you'd form these moments.
Yeah.
Was that sort of like a dream come true that day?
It is, and I kept visualising that as well, of course. I visualised winning the league, but we never done that, so I couldn't have been visualising hard enough. But you've got to, as you say, you've got to have dreams. And as a kid, you know, and you'll go through all these hard takes, but you've got to go, not just this football, this is life in general. Life's tough for everybody. And whether you're going to be a nurse, whether you're going to be a doctor, whether you're going to be a painter and decorator, you've got to go through all these stages. And just so happened football was my stage in life. That was my obsession at the time, you know. But it's all right having dreams, and I keep saying this to young players now, or if you want a business in life, it's all right having dreams, and it just doesn't come. You've got to then put the hard work in, you've got to sacrifice, you've got to get up in the mornings and go training. Well, if you're running a business, you've got to be up before anybody else in that business to go. You've got to put the hard graft in, and then you'll get the rewards for that.
Excellent. So we touched on some of the younger guys in that team, Ian Ferguson, Paul Lambert. Would you?
Brian Hamilton.
Brian Hamilton. Would you expect, you know, Paul Lambert won the European Cup? Did you see that in those boys coming through?
Well,
that
I get
team?
laughed at because I played with Paul Lambert, and then I became his manager. I played player manager, and Paul played, and I says Paul Lambert. I got it wrong because I said Paul Lambert would be a £1 million player. And I think it was even Jonathan Watson away back in the day done a thing me as a car salesman saying that he's worth this sort of money. But Paul became £8 million player or whatever.
Top
but you could tell there was a lot of young players there who were, Brian Hamilton as well. I mean, they were all top young players in the days. And hopefully myself, Frank McGarvey's and players like that were the older sort of. What Fergie had done in the days, bringing Jimmy Bowen and Jackie Copeland, Dean Monroe's in, they had Frank McGarvey, myself, older players.
So you obviously after when your career's come to a close, you mentioned you have become player manager. How did you? It's not something you see really in the modern game. How did you find merging the two roles together?
Couldn't do it. It was when I think at the time, it's probably one of the biggest mistakes. And I got to a stage as I left St Mirren, I resigned because I felt so. Player manager, I lasted for a wee while, but my assistant was Frank McGarvey, who was also a player. So you can imagine
the two E's on the park.
Aye, but as a guy as well, when you're in the dressing room, it was all your pals one week, and the following week I'm the manager, and that was tough to do that. But we managed it. We got through it, and then I started. Next years we brought in guys like Gordon Smith and Gordon McQueen came in as well as coach. These things that helped a great deal. But I always thought St Mirren, and to be honest, I always thought St Mirren should be up challenging that. It was always my thing, challenging for Europe, winning cups, winning things. And under me, the first time it wasn't happening, although we had a good side and we were doing well. And I was getting too much pressure on myself with that. I was thinking, we should be winning the league, we should be winning this. So I got to a stage and I never had any management training. I've just went for a player into management, and it's a different ballgame dealing with players, being able to sit and do it. So I struggled with it my first time, and I really I went away. I sat down with the deck and said, "Listen, I'm leaving," and stuff like that. Then I went away and I educated myself. I started to really say, right, I'm going to really educate myself. I started going on management courses. I started doing coaching courses and learning. So I started doing all that. So
how did you find that? Obviously, educating yourself older after there's a lot more information on dyslexia. And that. Did you find it easier going back in?
Yeah, probably sort of easier, but it was I wasn't interested at that time. It was football. Even when I got the job as player manager, it was still football. But then when I'd done it, I made a decision to sort of, go back to college and do stuff and try and they were very patient because they realised then you had dyslexia and where in the days they never. So they helped you through it. And also I'd done all my coaching badges, European badges and all that, which I managed to get. But that was football.
Whereabouts did you go?
Largs.
That's the story you hear for everybody. How did? Was there any sort of famous names on your course when you were down there?
Yeah, there was. Alex Ferguson was on the course, and I mean he went through the badges well. Walter Smith. Abroad there was who was it who used to come again? I just missed out, and the sort of Mourinho came there. Everybody,
the famous one is
the famous
Mourinho going down there to Largs.
But it was even in the days, all your Italian coach, everybody went to Largs because it was renowned as the best in the world because they'd done more practical work.
Yeah.
A lot of theory work was done in other courses. If you went to Italy, it was all theory, on a board and doing things. But the main thing at Largs was your practical, you're on the football part, dealing with players and dealing with stuff. And that's how, for years, all the top coaches came across to get that learning.
So you touched on also struggling to kind of come out of the dressing room and into management.
Yeah.
That was a criticism you've heard. A famous was Alan McCoist at Rangers.
Right.
He was the assistant manager, the player's best pal, and then try to make that transition into being the boss.
Yeah.
Is that something you found a bit difficult? Do you think maybe you should have went somewhere else to start your management career?
Maybe. I look back now, I was fortunately, I was captain of the club for a number of years and I kept myself to myself. I wasn't dead pally with them all, but I was still pally enough coming out of there into playing the game, then coming in at half time and saying to players, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. They're going, well, you're not playing to me either. Do you know what I mean? So it was all these things. It was very difficult, and there's no many people can do that sort of job, be a player manager. And I think, as you say, maybe going away for a spell might have helped me. Yeah.
So unfortunately, you lost your son while you were out of football, and that's a horrible thing to go through. But you've channeled that into writing sort of children's books. How did that sort of come about? Incredible,
yeah. Just as you say, well, I'll tell you the story quickly. I just came back to St Mirren. Yeah. Tony was 4.5 years of age. We actually played Celtic our first game. We won 3-1 at Parkhead, which was phenomenal. And we won the League Cup section. And just after that, I had my house in Thornley Park Avenue, which was a dream of mine as well. If you think I had that, I had everything going for me. I had my daughter, I had my wife, of course, my daughter, my son. I had everything that you can imagine in life. But within 6 weeks, that changed because Tony took unwell. And long story short, but he sort of went for 2.5 years fighting this, but he sadly passed when he was 6.5. And I'm telling you this because this is how I managed to do the books after this. But I did notice once he did pass away, on that day, 9th of January, it had been a mucky morning, raining off and on, and I walked out of York Hill Hospital, just come right out the front gates, and in the sky was this massive double rainbow. I've never seen one like it since. It was stunning, this double rainbow. And it was a strange thing because I've just left my son, who's passed away, looking at this rainbow, and I was getting a great peace inside. Didn't realise it at the time, probably. So that's the rainbow, remember that? When Tony was born, I always gave my kids nicknames. I don't know, most parents do. When Lorraine was born, I called her Babacucci. When Tony was born, they'd say, believe it or not, I had a lot of hair in the days as well, but he was very hairy. He was very hairy. He looked like a wee bear, so I called him Babacucci Bear. So that was a nickname I gave him, Babacucci Bear, the rainbow. So I did notice when you lose somebody, especially a child, we couldn't speak about it. Me and my missus at the time, and even Lorraine. Lorraine was only, Tony was 6.5, she was 8. She was only 1.5 years older. And we couldn't really speak about it. And when you would come out the door to walk, neighbours didn't know what to do. They would cross the road. So all these things, so you imagine what that was like. And it was years later, I always wanted to do something. And it was my daughter who actually, Lorraine, put it in my mind because she says, when you're a football player, and a lot of football players will realise this, you're very selfish and all you do is train, play, it's all about your career. But my daughter remembered me every night telling her and Tony stories, just make up stories and stuff like that. And she went, oh, I used to love that. So I was sitting one night in the house and I was just thinking when I'm saying, how can I help people through bereavement? You know, I've lost, not just a child, but you know, they've lost bereavement, they've lost people. And again, dyslexia or this sort of thing, I thought of Baba Coochie Bear, the Rainbow. My brother Tam, who's involved with a peace group, no, a World Peace Person Society, they've got a peace pole which says, may peace prevail on earth. How good that is now, when you think about that in the world. So try to make Baba Coochie a wee sort of superhero. Peace pole, places a peace pole on the ground and says, may peace prevail on earth. The double rainbow comes out, takes kids through the rainbow. So it's working through children's hearts to change the world. But we found that for adults, it was brilliant as well. And I'd done the first book, The Promise Together Again, was all about bereavement. Yeah. The second book, I didn't want Tony just remembered for bereavement. Yeah. He wanted to be a footballer as well. Even at 40, he was kicking the ball about. Even in the hospital, when he walked about with his pole, he used to kick the ball about. So I thought, and it was a pal of mine, Jed McCabe, who a light bulb moment of game said to me, Tony, what, have you never thought of writing a football thing with Baba Coochie? And I thought, So I did, and it's called The Dream You Can Do This. And it's Baba Coochie wanting to be. And it's my journey really, getting told you're too small, you're not good enough, all these type of things. And his manager was Sir Ferguson, Sir Alex Ferguson, Bear Messi, Bear. So I made it all like Bears, no Bears thing, and Baba Coochie Bear goes in that journey. But there's a girl in the thing as well who wants to be a singer and it goes through this sort of stuff. So I managed to do that, but why we'd done the books as well was for Malawi. There was a village in Malawi and needed help, and we sold all these books, and that money went to Malawi. Naguama, a village called, and to this day we don't support it because it's self-sufficient, but what we did with the money, it was made from these books, and we sold a lot of books. We managed to do a children's land over there. We managed to do a creche where Tony's photographs up, so he's remembered over there. And there's a chicken house. There are all these things going on, and it was just, it's key. I love talking about Tony now. No, I could talk all day about Tony. So the great thing about, and that's where his nickname Baba Coochie. That's Tony. So for something so tragic, through a lot of people's help as well, and not just me, there's some really positive coming out of Tony's passing away, and that keeps me sane because you never ever go over it. People say, oh, time's a healer. Time's no a healer for losing anybody, not just a child, anybody. It's one of the things I get when I hear people saying, time. And I suppose it's, in a way, they're trying to help, but it's not, time is no a healer. We're losing people's concerned. You've got to learn to live with it every day, and that's another battle.
Well, thank you for talking about that with me.
No, I'd love to talk about it. Yeah, thanks for asking.
It's amazing that you've managed to, take that into doing what you've done. We'll get back to the football. You mentioned you went back to St Mirren as a better coach. How did you feel you're going back into management for a second spell? Did you feel ready?
It. Yeah, I loved it. I had a young team. We had under-18s team really. Stephen McGarry, Colin Drew, Chrissy Kerr, what do you call him? I don't want to miss David Milne, Ryan Heatherson. There's quite a few players I'm missing. They're all young kids at that time in that division. And the idea was just to keep them in that division because the club was trying to get bought over with a guy called Roger Brearley or something at the time. And with a very, very young team. But we managed to keep them in that division. Actually, it was, but with such a Shuggy Murray, of course. Shuggy famous of most appearances for St Mirren. So these boys, he did. And I'm delighted because Shuggy was a fantastic. And I'm missing out with Colin Drew. I'm missing out a lot of young players.
They'll come to you.
I know, sorry, because I hate to mention this one because at that time there was 7 or 8 of them. And one of my proudest moments was that team, we beat Morton 2-0 down at Morton. And I remember after the game, and in these days you had a big bath, and all these kids, 18, 19-year-olds, 17-year-olds, some of them, they beat Morton 2-0, which is our rival, and it was, they were all singing St Mirren songs and that, and I thought, this is it. No, and they were a great team. And I left actually, and then Tom Henry came in the following year. They won the championship, which was incredible.